Hello, welcome back. It is week 118 on Out on That Line podcast, your number one news source for news from the front lines of the PetroDragonic apocalypse. My name is Jeff with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
Oh, Jeff, that intro gave me chills, baby. It gave me chills. How did that feel for you? Checking in
It
with you here. Were you like floating above your body? Like,
so it was once I got in there, I kind of didn't know what was going on. I was like, only way out is through. But I'll tell you what, I was very nervous about saying that combination of words, the PetroDragonic apocalypse. And
mm,
it is relevant this week. It's not just something I made up because we're going to be talking about the newest King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album. And I'm going to give you the full title here, Alex. Are you ready? You can probably go get a sandwich. I'll be done
I,
in a second.
I'll see you in a minute.
It is PetroDragonic Apocalypse, semicolon, or Dawn of Eternal Night, colon, an annihilation of planet Earth and the beginning of merciless damnation. Again, by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
In
Now,
case you
if I
couldn't have guessed.
yeah, there's only one band that would have ever done something like that. Maybe an emo band back in the day would have had a song title like that, like Fall Out Boy or something like that. But nobody but King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard these days are going to have a title like that. And boy, howdy, what an experience this one was.
What was your experience? What was your exposure to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard before we listened to this one?
So I had found out about them through when I used to valet in past life. One of my guys that I valeted with, named Chase, was a musician in a band that was very good, but also listened to, or at least talked about once in a while, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. You'd also talk about the OCs, who are also fantastic if people haven't listened to them. But King Gizzard, he was like, there's no other concert like that. They come out with a million albums, and they certainly do. What do they have? 30 something albums? I mean, it's a
This is
ridiculous
their
number.
24th studio album.
Okay.
Just
And then,
studio albums.
yeah. And then how many live albums? I'm sure a zillion.
Umpteen.
Yeah. They are prolific. So last year, I think they came out with 5 studio albums in 2022. So
3 in October alone, yeah.
yeah, and they play everything. So we're gonna get into. I feel like we're getting deep into King Gizzard already. We're gonna have to put the
Mm.
brakes on because there was something that you wanted to talk about, and I know a little bit about this, so I'm very excited to talk about this.
All right. Well, I just kind of want to come on here and maybe like talk a little trash about Lana Del Rey. Maybe you can
Let's
help me
go.
understand the situation and fill any gaps I might have in the truth of the facts of what happened. So, what do you know? What do you know about
From
this?
from what I understand, and I think basically I saw a headline, maybe a Reddit thread or something, but not a lot of information. I was there for the comments because I knew they were going to absolutely be trashing Lana Del Rey. And that's really anytime I go on the internet, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm reading through those and they are lighting her up as Reddit does. It was beautiful. But what I saw was she was late for the show in the first place. And then it had a curfew because it was a festival, I think. I don't know which festival. And then she was like kind of belligerent and they had to like kick her out basically.
Okay. So, the backstory that I have to that whole thing is everybody got left waiting for like over and half an hour because her hair and makeup weren't done. And
Okay.
she just kind of showed up on the stage and said as much to everybody. And then, like, while she was performing, was having her hair and makeup done. And I guess gave a really shitty, lackluster performance, which was then canceled at the end or cut off at the end because it was a festival and there was a curfew. And people were pissed. People were pissed. But I would say rightfully so. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, am I? This is the question we pose. The Kesha people got to me, Jeff. So the new question is every week: am I the asshole? This segment is called "Am I the asshole?" So I ask you, Jeff: am I the asshole?
That's a very good Reddit tie-in after I just mentioned Reddit. So I just want to point that out. That was very good.
Oh my
Um,
God, that's true.
yeah, you're not the asshole, not at all. I think it is such garbage. Like, look, if an artist has, they're doing a whole tour, like 30, 40 something dates. Like if they're late once in a while because something came up, something happened, like I can be okay with that. I guess they're humans at the end of the day. But if you're just like something like that, I feel like is not a reason to be late, I guess. If you get in like a car accident on the way there, on the way to the venue, and you have to like be checked out, like that's what I'm saying is like that's fine. People are human, things are going to happen. But apparently she's like consistently done this, from what I understand from what I was reading in those comments. And I think overall, though, not to just like totally pile on her specifically, I think this happens a lot. I think that's something that this goes on a lot with a lot of different artists, that they just don't see the start of the show as anything other than a suggestion rather than what is supposed to be the start of the show. Thankfully, I haven't been to many concerts where like this has happened. The We Were Promised Jetpacks concert, that it really ended up being just the lead singer that came out and sang a few songs because their drummer had some stomach issues, I guess, had eaten some
Ah,
bad tamales or something like that. So
the
that
old
sort of
runny
thing,
bunnies.
I'm like, okay, last minute they probably can't find a drummer to fill in, and they don't want to put on a show that they can't like put their all into. I was like, I get it. I was upset because I wanted to see a full show, but I was like, I get it. But if you're just going to be late because you can't get your shit together, that's what I got a problem with. Is because a lot of these people were there to see Lana Del Rey for God knows what reason. They were there to see her specifically, and were there ready and waiting to see her perform again. God knows why. Um, and she was late. So like her fans paid good money, stood there for a long time, and she was late. And like hair and makeup, like what could be the excuse there? Maybe there is a good one. I don't know. But I think it's a real asshole move for her or anybody to do that sort of thing. And as if you're doing it consistently, that is a problem. You need to like figure some stuff out. Once in a while, things come up fine. But if it's consistent, that is a problem. And you are like really disrespecting the people that have gotten you to the point you're at.
Yeah, and I think about like obviously you have like genuine medical emergencies. Like John Mayer had to cancel that Dead and Company show that I almost went to last summer. And I gotta say, yeah, I don't mean to dunk on Tanner as a sidebar, but he was crushed. And the humor of the situation hit both me and Rory because we got all the way to SPAC to find out the show was canceled. And I found that very, very funny and like how like grim it was, but Tanner was devastated. I'm so sorry, buddy. Anyway, that was like a valid excuse to cancel a show. You have something like Luke Combs did a show once, I think up in Bangor, because my girlfriend of the pod's friends went, and he was super hoarse and he couldn't do a good show. And he was like, y'all paid for babysitters. Some of you maybe hotels, and you came for a show, and I can't give it to you. So I'm comping all your tickets. You're going to get
Mhm.
refunds. So it's like there are people that do cool and necessary shit like that when the chips are really down. I want to hear someone spin to me how Lana Del Rey is the victim because people don't understand what, like, oh, all the time and energy that goes into hair and makeup. But like, how does that constitute an emergency? Why is that the paying audience's problem? And that's what I don't fucking like. Say what you want about Taylor Swift. I think Taylor Swift genuinely cares about her fans enough to not fuck with them if she can help it. It seems like Lana Del Rey is exactly like the person she portrays in her music, and she just wants to fuck with people, and she just seems incredibly self-obsessed. And if any of this is coming across as a personal attack, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, sister-in-law of the pod is gonna love this segment. She listens as she's a loyal listener, so she's gonna love this segment.
You told me that beforehand, and I was like, all right, I got to go into this. I got to do a little pro wrestling work here. I really got to lay this one on thick.
Now, what do you say we move on to some more pressing business? A PetroDragonic apocalypse, if you will.
That sounds dire, almost like the dawn of an eternal night.
Yeah, almost just like that, actually. So we're gonna we're gonna talk about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. It's just fun to say. It rolls off the tongue. It's a great band name. Like obviously, that they're not going to probably take themselves that seriously overall with a name like that. But I'll tell you what, this is some serious music, my friend.
I mean, they're wild. Their shit is wild. The fact that for this album, they worked backwards from song titles. Stu is the like nominally considered like the front man.
Mhm.
Um, but he gave this interview where he talked about like, yeah, we had the song titles and then like a loose concept running through them. And we built all the songs backwards off that. They had like no musical ideas in mind. And it all just kind of came together as a thrash metal album out of nowhere. And they've got this like crazy, kooky, kind of psychedelic 70s sound. It reminds me a lot of, did you ever see Italian Spider-Man, the web short?
No, I don't think so.
It was this incredibly like ridiculous, retro, trippy. If you haven't seen Italian Spider-Man, look it up. It's hilarious. It's like 12 minutes long. You'll love it. But they definitely have this like unabashedly like retro psych 60s, 70s kind of aesthetic and sound. But then they go and they do a thrash metal album totally out of left field. They did one before this. What is it called? I wrote it down. Infest the Rat's Nest. You know, real sunshiny title.
Beautiful. Yeah,
You
beautiful.
know, light stuff. Browsing through Walmart, you happen upon that. But like the fact that they just decide to take it, like they produce so much material that they can afford to be like, man, fuck it, the next one can be a thrash one. We'll write each song in a day and a half.
Yeah, these songs are wild. And when you say like, okay, there's probably a lot of people that wrote songs in a day and a half, are they 8-minute long like thrash metal epics? Are they like all almost as good as Master of Puppets, like on their own? I mean, this album, just from start to finish, you could tell like obviously the name of the album. I'm gonna read it again just because it's so satisfying. So PetroDragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night, an annihilation of planet Earth and the beginning of merciless damnation. It's just a fantastic album title, and like you're in for like an epic sort of storyline. And I think I talked with you about this band called Bad Omens that has an album called like Finding God Before God Finds Me, and it's all about like finding God to get rid of him before he does anything about you. And it's very dark, it's very heavy, it's very like angry and violent, just kind of how I like my music these days. And this album just scratched so many itches for me. Like I love that kind of epic storytelling and like kind of battle play, I guess. Same thing you get with like Coheed and Cambria. Speaking of kind of working backwards from concepts and ideas, like King Gizzard does such a good job at just enveloping whatever genre they're in and making it their own. Like it's you can tell this is them, from compared to the other stuff that I've listened to in the past, even though they are so wild with the amount of genres and stuff that they will cover and go through, and just like the ground that they cover is just unbelievable. I don't know if there's another band that kind of could match what they've done. They just play thrash metal and like power metal and speed metal so well. It's like, how are they not a band that just does that? Like, this is as good as anything else in those genres that I've ever heard.
They truly do just do it all. They can do thrash, they can do very disciplined prog like you would think. They can do jam prog without it being fucking noodly bullshit like Fish. I hate Fish. Um, they're so good at so many different sounds, and they can put them in like a concept album, or they can put them all in the same album. Like Omnium Gatherum, I love that album so much I went out and bought it. There is so much different shit on that, and there's a song on it, Gaia, and that shit will make you want to run through a brick wall. Your next reaction video should react to Gaia.
Okay.
It's an absolute brick shit house of a song, and that sound is all over. I mean, it is PetroDragonic Apocalypse, and it's just it keeps you so endlessly satisfied because they put out so much content. You would think that's too much to keep up with, but I think the point of it is to just like keep turning it over and giving you all this new stuff to hear,
Mhm.
keeps you invested. But I also think it's kind of maybe a barrier to like normies. I guess if we're gonna like appeal to ourselves being hipsters, I don't know, maybe a little bit. I don't think you have a music podcast and get away with that, you know? So I think like mainstream might elude them a little more just because their shit is so like gimmicky and specific and off the wall, and they just create such a like punishing volume of material, but it's all like it feels fresh every time they do it. From and I'm not like a hardcore guy, but the last couple of albums and all and the stuff that I've gone through, it's
Mhm.
just like this is so fucking consistent.
Yeah, and you can tell that these I don't know when they decide they're gonna stop. Hopefully it's not anytime soon, but I feel like this is a situation where just like, we've got it in us right now. We're gonna squeeze every last drop out of it. Like, whatever they feel like doing, whatever idea any one of them brings in, it seems like it just gets done. And the whole story, like, and to be so prolific and also have like, there's one thing, you could write a bunch of rap songs and beats and indie songs, and you could do a bunch of that stuff that all sounds very much the same. Put the least meaningful lyrics you possibly can to it, and it'll be like radio friendly and a radio hit. You can do that forever if you want, and you can pump those out time after time after time. But to come up with a whole storyline, so to start with, like, talking about humanity's love for like fossil fuels and how much of a problem it is, this like consumerist society that the majority of the earth participates in like what it ends up being. But instead of, and so we move into the kind of what you'd expect, the super storms, the supercells, those things that start destroying things with weather. And then all of a sudden we get a dragon. Like, the all of a sudden there's witches and there's a dragon created, and it's all of a sudden you spin off into this sci-fi story from like a climate disaster movie, from like Twister or Don't Look Up. And all of a sudden you're in like Game of Thrones. And it's just so cool that none of it feels out of place or feels like it doesn't belong throughout the album. Like, as you go through and hear the lyrics, it's like all of it's very intense and very emotional, very heavy metal. But the way they use breakdowns, they don't really slow it down ever in this album. But the way they use breakdowns, that serves as the points where it's like the story's breathing a little bit, allowing you to digest it. And then it goes into another crazy thing that happens that destroys all humanity. And it's just like so good how they move you through all that while still being just a pure, honest thrash album.
I love the way that it does. It embodies the kind of story they're telling, which is like kind of cheesy, let's be honest, like 80s sword and sandal epic. Like it has that kind of a feel to it because,
Mhm.
like you said, it bumps up through all these levels. We fetishize industrialization and then nature comes to take it back. And so we're like, hey, witches, you're dialed into nature. Sorry, we made fun of you all the time. Can you save us? They accidentally conjure a monster. Monster lays waste to humanity. And it's just, it's goofy, but then they make this like incredible thrash metal ride over it. So, the lyrics, Gila, Gila, Godzilla,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, Godzilla, Gorilla, it's tongue in cheek shit you're supposed to be laughing with, but it's delivered with like some of the most technical, structured, ballsy thrash. Like it has like such a big orchestral sound. It doesn't sound like that's kind of my problem with some melodic metal that I've listened to. I
Mhm.
just haven't listened to enough good stuff or it's just in for me. But it can kind of end up sounding so programmed and so produced. But like what King
Mhm.
Gizzard does is like really inject that kind of like character and energy and life like you do with like an orchestra. Like those musicians have to get their bodies into it, and you can like feel body in King Gizzard's music. And it's just like you're consistently surprised if that were even possible.
I would suggest that you check out a band called Fugitive and the song Hell's Half Acre. It's about a family in Texas that I think killed a bunch of people on their property. And so they ended up
Hmm.
calling the property Hell's Half Acre.
And it's
But
good
it's
melodic
another
metal, or is this more Paleface the Orphan?
this no, 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 not Paleface. This is more like this King Gizzard album. They play like power metal, like metalcore, they play like heavy metal. I saw them open for Turnstile and they're fantastic. But that song specifically, I think their whole EP is awesome. You may not be into it because it's just like thrash metal. But Hell's Half Acre is great because it's a storyline to go along with the song, and it's like it's very, very good, and they're very technical and like just like a punch in the gut. It's so good.
See, and that's a weird thing about me is I've always been like, oh, I like loose and sloppy and weird choices and distinct kind of dog-eared things. I still do. 100 Gex was one of those kind of things for me where it's like, this is kind of like there's an idea, but it's flying by the seat of its pants and it's having fun. And I'm like very attracted to that kind of thing. But I find increasingly with some of these bands that we're taking a look at with how like disciplined they are, it's very rewarding. It's why I love Steely Dan. Steely Dan is just like they were studio perfectionists, and it's just every single time like locked in perfectly. So I'm finding like a lot of joy in the balance. And again, King Gizzard is one of those groups that can give you that. And Omnium Gatherum, I think, is like I was so drawn to that album just because of like how well they could swing and how well they can carry a concept
Mhm.
to the point where there's like a conspiracy theory or maybe just a theory within the fandom apparently that is about like the GIZZ verse, how all the albums are related somehow. Maybe not the same story, but maybe some kind of like dimensional universal relationship. But like that and the visuals they use and their sound, like it's a whole presentation on par with like the shit Gorillas is doing and a little more personal because it's not cartoons. So it's like a very gratifying experience because it's not just a listen, it is an experience.
It's dangerously close to being called the Jizz verse. I'm not gonna not gonna lie,
I thought
yeah.
that immediately. Gif Jiff, enter the
That's a
Jizz verse. You
that's
don't
what I
want
got
that.
from that. But I'll have to look into that because if that's the case and they are all like intertwined and related, like obviously I love Coheed, so like that's right up my alley.
That's what I was thinking. That's what
Yeah.
I was thinking when I read that tidbit. I'm like, oh well, Jeff shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah. And I mean, you even said when you suggested this album that you felt like this one was gonna appeal to me, and you nailed it.
Yeah, I like to think our years of rapport really paid off and culminated in the Jizz verse.
Well, what do you want to talk about some specific songs and like get into some before we get out of here? Because there's a couple points that I specifically want to point out that were just some of the tastiest musicality I've ever heard. Um,
Yeah, jump into it.
the transition between Converge and Witchcraft, it's just smooth. It's like one song just bleeding right into the next, and you're immediately just like, "Oh, that was nice," and then hit over the head with another fantastic riff and like this time signature that I could never probably figure out myself. I'd probably have to call Tanner to help me out with that. But it's just the way they just go from it sounds like it's about to go off the rails all the time. It's just like there's a mad conductor at the front that's just pushing that baby to the limit because every time it's so energetic, it like gets into your bones, like the way the bass line and the drums play together. And then when that rhythm guitar just lines up with the rhythm section, when they're starting to play some of those breakdowns and riffs is just so good. I mean, it's as good as metal gets, to be honest with you. And I challenge anybody to try to tell me any different just because they're not a metal band, even though I think a lot of people do consider them to be a metal band because they're good enough at it that they could play a whole metal show alongside anybody. This album I think is going to hold up for me forever. I mean, it's that good. Like I don't know if I'm selling enough how much I really enjoyed every single second of this album.
And I wasn't sure if I would when I started listening to it because it dawned on me. I'm like, oh, this is all done in the thrash style, which is very good. But you like, again, Omnium Gatherum is like the touchstone for me because it just
Mhm.
threw so much different stuff at me. And it was so impossibly long. And I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of like a zippy 45 minutes. And you listen and then you kind of pick up on like what's going on. It's like one long thing. It's like the Messiah, like Handel's The Messiah,
Mhm.
where it's like, here are these little passages we mark that are like slightly different, but they all kind of carry this one sound over, almost like in a jam where you start somewhere, you jam out, and you got to bring it back to that same point. They do that in this entire album. And it's just kind of crazy that the transitions are so simple and smooth and almost like undetectable in certain ways. They just kept the energy up. And it really was kind of like a whole seamless thing. So again, like taking it on a technical level, as gratifying as it is as a story, and just the way it sounds, because of the shit that they do with the way that they play these what are they called? Microtonal guitars. I looked into
Mhm.
that shit. I'm like, how do they get their
Yeah.
sound? The way that they like, that's not thrash, but they sneak that in there in sneaky little ways, and it's so distinctively King Gizzard. So like anyone asks you what their sound is, it's that it's microtonal music. Because instead of like we think of like the scale is like 12 A B C D E F G whatever, like and sharps and
Mhm.
flats, they double that. So there's shit in between the notes, semitones. It's the wildest shit ever. It's like their proprietary blend, and then they snuck it into a thrash album for conceptual unity's sake. They're madmen. Kind of remind me of Frank Zappa, just to get him into the episode.
Oh,
And
honestly, might
yeah,
be the most relevant reference you ever made about Frank Zappa.
in a long time.
Yeah. Like this album was probably the most relevant way to get him in there for his weekly mention. It just for me, I don't know. Like I've always liked King Gizzard, never liked them more than this, because I don't know how they get better at metal than this, but if they can, I can't wait to hear it.
So yeah, I'm new to the game. I think the first album I heard was Fishing for Fishies. I heard a song off that, saw the weird name and was like, yeah, and kept listening to more. Omnium Gatherum again, the first one I went all the way through, and it's just been like a steady progression. And you hear something like this, and everything they released in Gizztober, um, that 3 album October, I mean, that's insane. Their work ethic, their like prolificacy is off the charts, and it's just great music. So like the volume that they put out is not a gimmick. Their gimmick is not a gimmick. They're just like perfect. I haven't heard any King Gizzard that I have hated or not liked. So
Mhm.
maybe I'll strike out at some point, but up until that point, I got to go ahead and give this album like a hearty buy it.
Oh yeah, I'm on that train too, buddy. So 100% buy it. I'm gonna go look for it. I think King Gizzard vinyl is a little hard to find because I think people snap it up every time they see it.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely gonna take a look for it. Maybe I can order it online. Um, but it's just so good. I mean, this was as good as like that when Turnstile came out with Glow On. Like you remember how deep I got into that album. That album's still fantastic. If you folks haven't listened to that, go do it. But also go out and buy King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I'm going to hit you with it one more time. In PetroDragonic Apocalypse or Dawn of Eternal Night, an annihilation of planet Earth, and the beginning of merciless damnation. Now, Alex, where else can you find some merciless damnation from out on that line?
Well, I think you're going to find it in a PetroDragonic lair, steeped in apocalyptic lore and annihilating planet Earth, and also your eye holes and ear holes. This wasn't my strongest work, but you can see some of my strongest work in our back catalog. Brought it around. Thank you very much to everyone that said I was washed up. Fuck you. You can go to youtube.com/C/out on that line. That's right. There is an absolute ocean of gold sitting under your feet. Not unlike you were the dragon Smaug from The Hobbit and The Hobbit sequels. So what are you waiting for? Why don't you get in there? Why don't you swim around in the treasure like Scrooge McDuck? We're throwing all the pop culture at you, okay? You can see if every episode ends in such an incoherent and unhinged manner. Spoiler alert, they all do. But see for yourself, see our reaction videos, see the podcast, see singles videos, see it all and more at youtube.com/C/out on that line.
That was it. So I know you mentioned in the middle there that you didn't think that was your best work. I happen to disagree. I think that was some fantastic work, and we'll see you next time.